All right, welcome to all of our virtual viewers, and welcome to everybody who's here with us in the space of Charis Books. Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We turned 50 last November. Thank you. Yeah, we're very glad to be elders, middle-aged at the very least, elders in the book world. And we're very glad to be here with all of you. We have loved Casey Plett as long as we have known her. Um, Thank you. I think we first met at a American Booksellers Association conference, and we kept saying like, "Oh, well, we'd love for you to come to Atlanta," and so it is kismet that she finally was able to make it happen because Atlanta. The joke is that you have to go through the Atlanta airport to get to hell. So luckily, she is not going to hell. She's going to somewhere much better, but she is on her way through the Atlanta airport and so generously offered to stop by for a quickie. And so we all get to, that's right. That's right. So we all benefit from that tonight. And I asked Casey to talk about her work, but also talk about LittlePuss Press, which is their tagline is a feminist press run by trans women. And that's really important to us because we have always talked about Charis as a feminist bookstore, not as a women's bookstore, even when that was sort of the parlance in the 70s and 80s. It's really important to me as a trans person that we talk about what feminism, what trans people give to feminism, and how much we offer feminism through our brilliance and our experiences, and how much we offer art and literature. And so I think LittlePuss Press, just personally for me, is such a beautiful example of the kind of work that Charis wants to be putting out in the world, and that I want to see us, promote and embrace and help other writers, including folks who are in this room, create. So we're just grateful for the work that you do, Casey. And when I was thinking about who I wanted to have interview you, I immediately thought of Jamie Hare. Jamie is a library worker and student based here in Decatur. She's the founder and facilitator of the Atlanta T4T Book Club, in which trans feminine folks gather together to read and discuss works by trans feminine authors. In previous lives, she has been a student of religion and worked for the Rosa Luxemburg I'm saying that wrong, Stiftung, an internationally operating progressive nonprofit institution for political education, where her primary responsibilities concerned socio-ecological transformation, particularly in relationship to the global South. And Jamie is just someone who loves books and loves community, and so I really wanted her to have this opportunity to get to talk to you. And Casey's official bio is that she is the author of On Community, A Dream of a Woman, Little Fish, A Safe Girl to Love, and is the co-editor of Meanwhile, Elsewhere, Science Fiction and Fantasy from Transgender Writers. She's an assistant professor of English and Film at Ohio University and the publisher at LittlePuss Press. So please put your hands together and welcome Casey Plett and Jamie Hare.
That's a really beautiful introduction. Thank you, ER. Thank you. The feeling goes right. The feeling goes right back to you as a publisher to everything that you do as an independent bookseller. It is like a complete like symbiosis, and it feels very special that we're doing this right now. So right back at you. Yeah.
Oh,
sure. I was just thinking like as we started like at 7:03, and I was like, this is the earliest I've ever seen a gay event start. I'm like just like I don't know. I'm just really impressed with all of us. Like I just think that's really something to behold. Anyway.
well, thank you for being here with us. I'm really excited about this. I'm a huge fan. So when ER asked me to do this, I thought I'm just going to be a fangirl the whole time and just talk about how great you are and like read passages from your books and be like, wasn't that great? But our topic for today is the making of LittlePuss Press. And before we get to that, though, I'd like to set the scene and position Little Press within the field of trans publishing more generally. So in many narratives now, trans publishing kind of begins with Topside, but beginnings are rarely so simple. So what was the state of trans publishing free topside.
Yeah. Okay, man. It's strange times to think about. I think often that like the line that I would always sort of say is that like in the last decade and change, like trans people have been writing books forever. It's just that like trans writers started to get ISBNs, which is a okay, wonky crowd, excellent, amazing. Okay, for those of you who don't know, International Standard Book Number, which is like a thing that virtually every professionally published book will have on it. So of course, like trans people were writing zines, and trans people were making writing on the internet, and trans people were writing stuff underground, and that was happening for decades. And there was kind of like that going on, and there was like cool radical stuff in there, and then also there was I know in Topside we kind of like we always had a bit of a it would stick in our craw the memoir industrial complex that was like almost always these white middle class kind of like women who like transitioned in their 40s and 50s or something. There's some ways in which I think we were like I feel a little more complicated about the critiques that we leveled at those books now. Most of which were very fair, but that's maybe a whole other complicated issue. So I think like those were two of the things. There was the underground stuff that like was very like kind of like didn't really have like resources or money behind it, that kind of like rose and fell. And then there was like the memoir industrial complex. And I think maybe what I would think about that often is that there was like a lot of it was kind of like I want to phrase this carefully. It was either people kind of doing stuff on their own out on islands, or when it was community focused and community oriented, it would happen quickly and then fade because there were no resources and because there were no things. And so I think a lot of the idea of Topside was like, what if we try to kind of like build something that is sort of like lasting, and build something that is kind of trying to do something that is more artistically interesting and also talks about more than just like the trans people who do the memoir industrial complex thing. If you know the history of Topside, it flamed out horribly and terribly and had so many problems of its own. But I think that was like the aim, and that was how I was sort of described the scene before that. Does that feel? I don't know. Does that feel fair? Does that feel correct? I only just started thinking about this in the last like 5 minutes. But like if I remember back to what that time feels like, I think like that attempting to sort of like gather some cohesion together and try to build something was kind of like was like a very animating force. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
cool.
Absolutely. So then that all said, Topside, I think, seems to be remembered as something new, right? Like a press run by trans people, like publishing trans people for a trans audience. And of course, they published very influential works like Nevada by Imogen Binney, anthologies like Meanwhile Elsewhere. You had something to do with that as well. So how did you understand their mission, and what did they capture about the trans literary scene at that time, and what did they miss?
Yeah, gosh. Okay, a capturing thing. Wow. I think a lot of, for me, I'll tell you what my experience was in this individual, which I don't think was super unique. I think is that it was really sort of like even like taught me some of that stuff was possible. Like I remember even like what like there was a call out for an anthology of trans fiction. I was like, oh, trans fiction, like sure, okay, like I could maybe write a short story, like why not? And I think there was a lot of us who did, who actually like sort of like created work because a big thing that Topside kind of was just like to their broadcast to a lot of, and this is also like the early 2010s where all of a sudden there were like a lot of trans people who were starting to come out, and there was a lot of trans people who were starting, there was like a certain, I think, kind of like micro generation around that time, of which I consider myself part of. Like in like Nevada, for example, I mean, like Imogen had written lots of it beforehand, but it was just in a drawer. Like it was literally like I think she like submitted to Soft Skull in like the late 2000s, and then they didn't take it. A bunch of other people didn't take it, and then Topside was like, "Do you have any other stuff?" And she was like, "I don't know. I've got this like novel sitting around." She just kind of figured nothing was going to happen to it, and so, and then I think when I first the collection came out as which is the first book that Topside did, a anthology of short fiction. I thought, okay, sure, I can write a short story. I'll just like I'll give this a whirl. I was writing nonfiction at the time. That's what I wanted to do, but I hadn't thought about writing fiction, and so I just did it. I think a lot of people felt perhaps inspired to do so for that. Just like you can just kind of do things. So that's what I think. And there's so what was the first part of your question? What did it contribute, or what did
what
it?
did
Yeah,
it capture about
yeah.
literature at that time?
We could talk about this for so long, and I won't rant about it too much. I always want some very like enterprising young trans person to write a great oral history of Topside called Time Bombs: The Chaotic Rise and Fall of Topside Press, coming out in 2027. That'll like a real hit at the Lammys. Someone's got to do that, please. And then I'll spill lots of drama. But until then, yeah, I would say there was a lot. Um, there was a lot of this kind of like, oh, we could like, because also Topside made use of print on demand technology, which means you didn't have to put up the money for like large print runs. And we did all these events outside of the bookstore system, which I also have complicated feelings about. Actually, that can go in the oral history. But also did like these like tours where we just like went around doing tons of events in people's like basements and cafes and like community spaces, and we brought like put tons of trans people gathered in rooms together, and it was like a really special thing. So I think that like um there was a sort of like there was this thing of like, here's some things that are possible. There's like things that are possible that can happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did they miss?
Oh man. So on a wonky level, I think there were things about the actual sort of like meat and potatoes of the mechanics of how the book industry worked that Topside really, really didn't want to be involved in. Lots of which are super fair because there's lots of that stuff that's super screwed up. But I also think that there was a lot of people who ran Topside who weren't maybe super interested in seeing how like lots of marginalized populations have been, including not just trans people, have been figuring out how to like make those gears work for marginalized writers for decades, including people here at Charis Books. And there are ways to kind of like figure out how that works, and they can like put that sort of machinery to use. And I think Topside was maybe um, a little convinced that they were going to reinvent the wheel of some things that they didn't really need to. And I think that maybe played a small part in also why it didn't last as long. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
So would you like to comment on the demise of Topside?
So when I get interviewed for Time Bombs, The Chaotic Rise and Fall of Topside Press, coming out in 2027, honestly, no. The actual impetus that made it's a much long story when I think about it. I do think that there was a lot of work that it grew very quickly in a long period of time. It got a sort of it like there was a small amount of people doing a lot of work that grew too fast at one time. Um, and there was the actual mechanics of it was concentrated in the hands of one person who, when that person decided they didn't want to do it anymore, things kind of fell by the wayside. I talk about a little bit about this in my own community book, actually. And I'm being careful because I was careful when I wrote that. Like, I don't really want to rehash old drama. There's some things that like, it's I don't want to stoke old wounds or whatever. But I think there was a lot of too many things that got put into too small a number of people, and it wasn't sustainable, which is something that I think about a lot when I think about how we make LittlePuss run and we make LittlePuss sustainable. Me, Kat, and now Emily Jo, the three of us who run LittlePuss, we put lots and lots of effort into thinking like, how do we make sure we're not going to burn ourselves out? Like, how do we make sure that we're not going to just like I don't know, just like completely throw in the towel, and just like, how do we make sure that, and also how do we make sure that we are able to make it sustainable, that we can do right by the things that we want to do, that we can do right by the authors that we want to publish, and we can make the books good, and we can like not, not I don't know, not fail by any of the people that we tried to do things for. We spend lots of time thinking about that. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yes. What other lessons, either positive or negative, does LittlePuss take from Topside?
We always joke that we want to take the books seriously and ourselves not seriously at all. Which I think we try to do. We have slogans like "Always be pussing," "Full pussy now," "Whiskey is for closers." I think that Topside definitely ran into a problem. All of a sudden, we were just, well, I say we. I was not actually technically a part of smart side, but I kind of was in retrospect. Where Topside was just publishing way too many white people. There are like, and I think a lot of it comes down to like trying to avoid any sort of like a degree of self-importance, you know, like because there's also a bit of like, you know, like lots of people. There's been lots of like independent publishers out there in the world, and there's lots of books out there in the world, and there's lots of great writers. So I think we try to keep ourselves focused on the books and the work as much as humanly possible, which is one of many reasons why I'm glad that all of the LittlePuss books are out there right alongside of mine. Please go buy all LittlePuss books; they're great.
And Casey has kindly signed some of them. So
yeah, not the ones that aren't mine. That would be weird.
So what led you and Kat Fitzpatrick to found LittlePuss?
So this is actually a good story. So meanwhile, elsewhere, for a while, the Topside books were still available print on demand, even though the press itself was functionally not running anymore. Due to a wonky thing of how books work. It was sort of a zombie press, but because of how print on demand works, it's kind of like a perpetual motion machine where even if no one's doing upkeep for it, they could still be accessible. So Nevada was, my first book was, I've Got a Time Bomb was, the poetry books all were. But meanwhile, Elsewhere strangely fell off and no one could get it. And people were emailing us. Meanwhile, Elsewhere was the last book that Topside did. Kat and I co-edited it, book of sci-fi and fantasy. And they were like, so there were people like emailing us being like, is this like $300 on Amazon? Like, can we buy it from you? And we were like, no, here's a PDF. Like, go away. We don't know what happened. We really, really don't. This sucks. I'm so sorry. Here, take this free e-copy. And then there was one evening where it was literally me, Kat, and Jean Thornton were getting drunk in a backyard, in Kat's backyard in Brooklyn. And Kat and I were complaining about this fact in some rather impolite terms. About this series of events, and Jean Thornton, being as always the voice of reason, was like, "Don't you have the rights to the book still?" We're like, "Well, yes." But... And then she was like, "Why don't you just reprint the book? Like, you could just do it. Like, why don't you just do that?" We were like, "Oh, yeah." Right? Thank you. There's not a cooler origin story. But then the next morning, I woke up with a raging hangover and got off some print quotes. And I was like, "Hey, Kat, it's actually not as expensive as I thought." She was like, "Oh man, like okay, I guess we're gonna do this." And then and then we did, in terms of like the start slow thing, to give I suppose to give a little more credence to some semblance of forethought. We were like, okay, well, we felt very ginger about the whole Topside thing. We're like, let's reprint this book. If we do that, if that works out, we'll think about doing another one. We'll think about doing a new one. So like we reprinted Meanwhile Elsewhere. It went okay. It like sold. I was really touched. We got like a lot of support there. We got like a lot of people who were like, thought it was cool. We were like, okay. Kat had wanted to work with Cecilia Gentili, rest in peace, on a book for a long time. And was like, hey, do you still think about doing this? I think Cecilia was really bored of the pandemic. Was like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll write a fucking book, sure. And then Kat and Cecilia worked on a book, and it became Fault Us, which is also out there, which then got put out a year later. But that time, Emily, who was writing Girlfriends, had submitted to us. And then so we started slow. We did like a book a year. And we've sort of like very kind of each step of the way, we've been like, if this is when it stops working, it's fine. If this is when it like doesn't, if this is like as far as it goes, that's fine. But we will go like book by book, and we will be very careful about it. And now I run a publishing company, which is just a strange thing to find oneself in. Yeah.
How did you choose the name?
Oh, this is also a good story. Okay, so this was happening. This is when we were like reprinting Meanwhile Elsewhere, and my last book at the time was called Little Fish, and Kat's last book at the time was called GlamourPuss. And I walk in to Kat's house one day, and I was like, "Kat, I've got it." Yes, exactly. And Kat's girlfriend was like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you kidding me?" You've got to call it LittlePuss. I'm so glad she was there. Allison Howell really saved the day. Yeah. I had my dear friend Sarah. I told her that once, and she was like, "Glangfish," and I was like, "Yeah." And then she was like, the most nicest backhanded compliment I've ever received. She was like, "I don't know if I've heard you say something dumb before." So, and that's how we have LittlePuss Press.
So outside of Topside, what do you consider like your influences or models?
Oh goodness. So a lot of like the internet blogging like before like pre 2010s, like Elena Rose blogging as Little Light, um, was a pretty big influence on me. Um, I would say do, 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 Julia Serrano's Whipping Girl. Um, uh, yeah, and then like just lots of like random internet writing. You know, I was like, um, lots of the stuff that was around at the time I just didn't see. I just wasn't privy to. I just like didn't discover it, or I wasn't presented to me. Yeah.
Are there other presses you saw as like a model for, how to run yours?
So I learned a lot of kind of like nitty gritty of publishing post Topside. I didn't really know a lot about when Topside was getting going, I was working in a bookstore. So I learned a lot about the industry working at independent bookstores. And then after around the time Topside went down, I started working for this Canadian independent press called Biblioasis, and I was a publicist there. And so I learned a lot about like the mechanics of things and how just like a lot of like really boring nitty gritty of stuff works through that experience. Before Topside, I didn't really have any like industry knowledge at all, I would say. Yeah. Um, I thought what Beacon was doing was cool. I remember like seeing like Seal, Soft Skull. Yeah. But those are just like, oh, they did books that are neat. I wonder how that happened. And then the thought stopped there.
Understandable. So speaking of the boring nitty gritty, how do you divide up the labor of running a press between the three of you?
Yeah. A lot of it goes from just like me and Kat and Emily are very lucky. I think that a lot of our skills naturally complement each other, and the things that we're really happy to like let the buck stop with kind of like has sorted itself out. So for example, like stuff that has to do with production and how the books actually physically look, are all things that Kat is just like, we kind of know that like the two of us have some input on them, but she like typesets it, she lays them out, she like she like chooses fonts, that kind of thing. The books would look so terrible if I had to do those things. And I do a lot of sort of like administration, logistic stuff, and like I make sure there's like enough money in the bank account and people get paid on time, and like distribution, like stock and warehouses, that kind of thing. Emily is increasingly taking control of like the editorial submission stuff. We all still kind of edit books, although I'm taking a little bit of a step back from that recently. But there are things where all of us are. There's kind of no one part of the press where like there isn't one of us kind of like always kind of making sure that like, okay, we have to make sure the ball doesn't get dropped. Like we have to make sure that like this doesn't just like fall by the wayside. And I think we've just been really lucky that there aren't really haven't really been any huge holes in that process so far. Yeah, I do worry about this often because like a lot of it also just started with like me and Kat just kind of like uh just kind of like neurotically like yelling at each other and over every kind of platform for like years. And this is part of the little reason why I don't want to grow anymore. You know, I would much rather. I'm totally serious about this. I would much rather there be just like a ton more trans presses and for us to grow bigger and us to do more books. And totally legit, anybody in this room, I am happy to share information, share knowledge, and like talk about how one might possibly get a press off the ground and how to do things, how to grow things, and online as well. I'm like so serious about this. Like nothing, Kat and I have talked about this too. Like nothing would make us happier. I don't want to do more than four books a year. I don't want to grow more. I don't want to like, Lord, I definitely don't want like employees. Like, oh, that's terrible. Kat and I would always joke like, we're not going to hire people. We just exploit them. We're just so instead we'll exploit ourselves. Like that's way better. But but and then I mean there's also like honestly very serious ethical reasons why I don't want to grow bigger that feel like a part and parcel of why I'm doing this in the first place. But also part of it is that just like I don't know. I think I've seen also like a lot of like really cool like independent and kind of like from the ground up art projects that like start to grow bigger and there isn't and not everyone has and there isn't the capacity or ability to handle those kind of logistics and things fall apart. And I know that'd be the case for us, and I really don't want that to happen. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Is starting an independent trans publisher a good way to get rich?
I have a limo waiting outside of you for right now, actually. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's right.
So your tagline, as ER mentioned in the introduction, was a feminist press run by trans women. What does this mean to you? What does it mean to call it up?
Yeah, I think I wish Kat was here. She's a little more articulate about this. There's two sides of this. I'll start with the first one. The first is that like the idea of like feminism not being something that trans women are peripheral to, but in fact like very central to. And so as opposed to saying like a feminist press or a trans press, we can feel like very important to us to just like own the idea of feminism. And then second, I think like I'm more interested in I feel very like burned I was very fortunate that my career really took off in the 2010s when there was all the like hashtag we need diverse book stuff. And I think I feel a little burnt out about the idea of like trotting out like a marginalized artist, but everybody behind the scenes are like the same people that they've always been. And so I'm much more interested in centralizing like what about when you have those people run things as opposed to just like be the face of them. And there's also why like we don't have any we have no limits on who we will publish. Like we have cis friends too, you know. And totally and we don't we do not have any we say this on our submissions portal too. We have literally no restrictions on the demographics or anybody who submits to us. Anybody can. We have not published a cis person yet, but we got. Which sounds a lot more like facetious and joking than I mean to say. But like, we do get submissions from everybody. We take them all seriously, you know. So it feels more important to me to be like, as opposed to we are a press that publishes trans people, as to say that we are a press that is run by trans people and trans women specifically. Yeah.
So in your fiction, you seem admirably unconcerned with good representation, capital G, capital R. As a publisher, is something representation you take into consideration, and what guides your editorial policy?
We really, I can feel my curtains lowering as I say this. Like, I think that one thing we feel very, very dedicated to is that like we have to be so 100% behind the books and think they're just fucking awesome. Like, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want to put out a book that I can't just like go to the mat for with my entire life and I'll have all of us be like, we think this book is rad and it's so freaking good. I just like there's too many books, there's too much other stuff happening. Everybody who is involved in every single line of the book business, every single line of it knows that there is just like there's so many books out there and only so much energy one can put into them. So we really want to make sure that like that from start to finish, it's a book that we are just like cannot rip ourselves away from. We turn down lots of books that we think are great just because like it's just not quite there. The one other thing I'll say is that me, Kat, and Emily all have pretty different aesthetics. And one thing I think that is a really cool thing about the three of us is that if the three of us are all like, yeah, this is awesome, like this is great, then that probably means something. The three of us have to be super, super behind the book for us to say yes to it. There's been books where like one or two of us have been like, yeah, but then like, yeah, it has to be, I don't know, our powers combined. The Triforce has to be in alignment.
So independent press
and one of the reasons I want to be a little caged about it is I think that I like don't want to talk a little bit more about some of the things we look for because I don't want people to say like submit to us things like, oh well, Casey was saying this, because a lot of it is so like ineffable. A lot of it is so like, I mean, think about like when you pick up, like how many times have you picked up a book in your life and been like, holy shit, I didn't know I wanted to read this, but I do now, it's awesome, you know? Like And I feel really, really, I don't know, really dedicated to that. I guess the one thing I could say is that we want to be surprised.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you've weathered crises in the history of LittlePuss Press, and probably the best well known is the sudden closure of small press distribution. So how were you able to weather that and other crises that have come along?
Yeah. So small press distribution, yeah, closed randomly. For those who don't know, closed randomly and with no warning on March 28th. I think March 28th or 27th, something like that, 2024. All of a sudden, the books were not. We had literally sent them crates of books earlier that week. They're just like, we don't know when you're getting your books back. We don't know when you're getting paid. We're closed. We're not taking any more orders. And all the employees also had found out literally 24 hours beforehand they didn't have jobs anymore. Yeah, it was just like a real uh, gargantuan shit show all around. And then hundreds of small presses, including us, all of a sudden just gone, done. Um, so um, there were a few things. There were, I think I can separate up three separate things that happened. I'll try not to be too long-winded or to be too wonky about it. First of all, Metonymy Press. Shout out to Metonymy Press. Amazing. We had already been doing some Canadian distribution with them, and so we were able to kind of like backdoor with them to also then like distribute through the US with them, which is sort of this like wonky convoluted thing that like um I won't bore everyone with explaining, but let us keep some semblance of distribution in the US. Consortium, which distributes us now, was willing to they had like a long application process, but we kind of like went to them being like, hey, look, like I know we're small, I know we're not, but like we really kind of like got screwed here. Would you consider looking at our application? And they did. But then third of all, I mean, like every single person who is remotely tangentially related to the books industry was like, wow, everyone just got fucked. Like this is nobody's fault. This is okay, it's one guy's fault. um, anyway, but that's well, it's both mean and it's also not. It's also too mean. But basically, it was not the fault of any. Everyone understood that any press who was dealing with this, like, did not like all of a sudden just had a catastrophe dropped in their lap that they could not have predicted or could not have foreseen. Everyone, like, it just like shot around the book industry. Everyone knew the score, and everyone was like pretty willing to help, too. So like, lots of booksellers immediately like were willing to order wholesale from us. And we ran this Kickstarter for our next book. And we got lots and lots of we had fun with it, as we do. And we had a lot of people who bought it and donated to us. I think one thing that's also too, well, sorry, I'm trying to and also I don't know, there's like a lot of small presses who were just like really in it together about it. Some other distributors also, not just Consortium, really stepped into the breach to take a lot of people. Asterism took lots and lots of people. There was Itasca, there was IPG. A lot of those people reached out and be like, hey, do you need, like, we want to help like every single person across the industry. Maybe I'm being a little too starry-eyed or rose-colored hindsight 2020 glasses or whatever. But I don't know. I just remember there being this enormous outpouring from all corners of the industry being like, wow, everyone who got hit with this, like, this totally sucks. What can we do to help? So without being too cheesy about it, I mean, like, I don't know, community saved us. At least helped us weather the first year of that storm for sure. And with the Kickstarter thing, I think also like we were wary about taking donations at all. We always sort of have been for lots and lots of reasons. One, because Topside took off a lot of people's money. And a second, like, Kat and I have good jobs. We're like white ladies with graduate degrees. We want to be very careful about like kind of coming to hat in hand and being like, please give us money. But this one felt like, okay, like if we're going to do it, this is actually a time we're actually pretty in straits here. And then which is why we did the Kickstarter, and which is why we also gave like things for it. And we like tripled our goal. It was amazing. I do not know how we would have survived through 2024 without all of those things. Even now, we're like just kind of the finances for our new distributor are just kind of starting to kick in. So we're like just kind of like fully exited that whole storm, but like, yeah, it was pretty disastrous. That's a long answer to your question. I think I gave you like 10 answers. Is there anything you want to follow up on?
Just maybe shifting to a happier topic.
Sure.
And continuing with community. LittlePuss is known for throwing great parties.
Yeah.
So why are they important?
Let's see. Gosh, there's lots of answers to that question. Another thing I wish Kat was here because she always talks about like the political valence of having a good time, and I'm always like, yeah, and then she's like, no, really, and then she kind of like she will like talk for like 15 minutes about why that's true, and I'm like, yeah, man, sure, fucking awesome, dude. And so you'll have to get her here and ask her. She really knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. And but then also I think like I was really one thing I remember so much from the topside thing was just like, man, you get a bunch of people have a lot of excuse to just like get a bunch of trans people in a room, and lots of times like good things happen from that. And I think I do have like a bit of faith in that. Like I think like, and I've seen it just in my own, even not just topside, I've seen it in my own like writing and reading career over and over. And so much of books, I mean, like, I don't know, books are so solitary. It's a solitary business. Writing them is, publishing them is, editing them is. Like it's a very and it's a very kind of like private, internal, and intimate experience. So having to get to throw a party now and then, or just like putting a bunch of people in a room together, yeah, I mean, there's kind of why not? And then again, in all seriousness, I think it's like I can never think of any. I can never think why it's a bad reason to put a bunch of trans people in a room together. So, okay, I can, but like, you know what I mean?
So speaking of community, you have some famously complex thoughts around community. You wrote a great book on it. It's available for purchase.
Yes.
So I think LittlePuss has become an important node of the trans literary community. And do you see building and nurturing community as part of LittlePuss's mission?
It definitely feels like part of it, yeah. You know, I think to me it also feels like beyond the stuff that I already said. I think there's something to me that feels like hopefully it kind of like keeps one honest. In the same like if we're going to publish books, and if we are going to publish books and have events for them, to me it's sort of like, okay, like is this working? Is it worth it? Like does this still mean something? And then you know, and then when people come together and they like the thing and they like the books and they keep talking with each other, it's like, okay, cool. Like this is still like, I feel like it is a way that we kind of like keep ourselves honest. Kind of in the same vein. Bear with me here. In the same vein, why I read my own Goodreads reviews, which I know sounds totally ridiculous, but I'm serious in a way where it's like, okay, like is this like a good like is this working? Like, does this like is what's happening like resonating? You know, does it mean something? And then like, and I mean, the Goodreads reviews is a bit more of a minefield. You kind of have to put your internal hazmat suit on when you do that kind of thing. But in all seriousness, it's like, okay, yeah, like this is meaning something to some people, so we should continue to do it. Yeah, I think it keeps us honest.
So you've mentioned already that the landscape for publishing for trans people has shifted drastically over the past decade or so. Like, what's the current state of trans publishing, and how does LittlePuss fit into that?
I mean, I don't know. It's like changing by the day, you know. Like the NEA funding just got zonked from tons of publishers this week. Many of whom like publish lots of trans people. Nightboat, Feminist Press. Like I mean, it's literally changing by the day in a pretty grim fashion. So, I don't know if I have like a really smart answer to that question. But certainly something that is not changing is that like trans people are still writing lots of really amazing work, and that work should probably get out there. So.
Speaking of getting work out there, it's been a busy year so far with LittlePuss, and you have 2 new titles out. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, realistic fiction and worthy of the event. Okay. So Worthy of the Event is a 7-part essay on life and death by an Australian trans woman who transitioned in the 1960s. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. It is it like I mean, it's right for sale right there. Just go pick it up and you'll start reading about like my vagina disappoints me. And then it kind of just like continues to go at 120 miles an hour from there. It like changed my life. And it was, I like, I feel like I closed that book and I feel like, okay, I understand that I can like maybe actually live a complete life. And I'm being completely serious when I say that. And then there is Realistic Fiction by Anton Solomonic, which our tagline is finally a book for men. um, um, the way we'd always pitch it to booksellers, we would say this is like imagine if Chaplin was writing Kafka stories. Um, and and I think it's like, and in all seriousness, it's definitely like one of like the funnier books we've ever published, which like feels really nice. I also feel really dedicated that like I don't know, like trans people are funny as shit. Like we're some of the funniest people on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, we should like there should be like more of us being funny around in our art and stuff. Um, but I think one of the things about Anton's story is that they seem like so funny and they're so absurd. And there's people doing all these like wacky off kilter stuff, and then you realize and you're like, oh, I'm actually also completely devastated, and this was heartbreaking. Um, uh, yeah, Realistic Fiction by Anton Slomanic. Also, Gene called it Sonic the Hedgehog aesthetics mixed with being a trans Thomas Mann. So I've never read Thomas Mann, but I assume that sounds smart. So we put it on the back cover.
And what's coming up next? What's on the horizon?
Ooh, we have a horror novel called Persona by Aoife Josie Clements. It completely feels like we might actually just plunge the entire world into hell by releasing it. I'm pretty sure that it's incredible. It's amazing. It's also terrifying, and I feel my soul being sucked into the void every time I've read it. Doesn't that sound great, everyone? Yeah. Uh-huh. Um, say what? Big improvement. Amazing. Yeah. The tagline for that is when a trans woman discovers pornography of herself she has no memory of making, only to be drawn to an unnameably deeper evil. Yeah. So that's coming out in January. We wanted to release it right on Valentine's Day. And then our distribution team was like, look, if you want to do that, you actually have to publish it in January because that way the bookstores will have it in time for February. And we're like, fine. So anyway, so it's a January. So it's gonna be a January book. And then in November we have the anthology of this zines called Gender Trash from Hell, which were these like old cool early mid 90s like radical punk trans zines by these like two trans women in Toronto, Mira Soleil Ross and Xanther Philippa McKay, who were like that really sort of feels like in some ways kind of like the road not taken when it comes to trans politics. And it was like punchy, it was angry, it was funny, it was like poetry in it. There were like rants about the crying game, which they loved. They were like, the Silence of the Lambs bad, the crying game good. Like, okay. And they were also like they were like breaking down like the stealth models of things. They were like publishing works by trans prisoners, and they were like paying attention to how like prisoners' rights intersected with trans rights and intersected with sex workers' rights. And they were like all of this stuff was together under like one roof um in these zines that were just sort of like made this like big fireball in the mid 90s, and then just kind of got like, again, as I was saying at the beginning, kind of got like fell by like kind of got like lost to the corners of the internet, and only like if you knew you knew. So we are bringing them back into print in a full anthology. There's also an entire fifth issue that never got published that was in the archives that Mira has blessed us to publish, so that'll be as well. And we're for events. They also made this movie called Gender Troublemakers that are really just them like it's like half of them like bitching about the cis gay men in their life, and then just like fucking on camera. And I think we're gonna like just do screenings around the country for book launches. So watch for that, everybody, in November 2025. Gender Trash from Hell.
Hearing you talk about these titles shows that you really are publishing things that you love and are excited about.
I don't want to waste.
It really comes through in how you talk about.
I mean it. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to waste anybody's time. You know. Thank you. Thank you.
I think with that we can move to audience questions.
So if anyone has a question, I'll bring the mic to you only so that our online folks can hear you. Yeah.
I'm a writer, and
Awesome.
thank you. I'm publishing a book with the academic press, and like the author gets like 12% of list price. I know like a lot of bigger publishers, it can be like 10. With you guys, is it since y'all are independent, is it different than that? Is like it better?
No, it's not. It's worse.
Oh,
Yeah. It's 7.
Mm.
Um, uh, some do it by like list, like rolling off list. Some do more off of net. Like when I get paid through Arsenal My Press, it's off net, which means that it's also like the money they get paid, so it ends up being around the same like amount of numbers. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Congratulations on getting your book with an academic press. If you want to talk about that more afterwards, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what you're working on in your own writing now?
Oh boy. I have a novel that I am trying to work on that is told from the point of view of an 18-year-old cis lesbian whose best friend is clearly a closeted trans woman, and no one knows it.
Can't wait.
It's really happy.
Just like all your other books.
Thanks for seeing me.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna have you come up a little bit just because the thing will squeak.
Hi. So I got really nerdy about like trans femme fiction publishing like a couple years ago, and I would watch all these like old like panels of like Topside Press and like.
Oh shit! You see the staking or claim one?
I don't know if I've seen that.
Okay,
one.
sorry. Go on.
Actually, maybe I'm not sure. It's been years, but anyway, I remember they were kind of talking about the history of like kind of contemporary trans fiction and. The narrative at the time was talking about how like Nevada really did like change everything in terms of like the kind of like informal tone that like trans women would like write, and like after Nevada like that tone sort of like spread, and like more authors felt able to write in that way. And I guess just like with hindsight, is that like does that feel like a flattening narrative, or is that like actually like or is it more complex, or like I guess that's my question.
Does Nevada feel like a flattening narrative, or is it more
no does the idea, or does the narrative that like Nevada was kind of like this single locus that like changed everything and changed the tone that people wrote in, is that narrative with hindsight like kind of a flattening narrative that like kind of makes less complex, I guess?
Yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying. No, I don't think so. I think that's like an accurate statement. I think like when Nevada landed, it was just like this enormous like explosion. And for better and for worse. I mean Nevada rules and changed my life, and it like helped me write. And there's also plenty of trans women who I know who didn't do that for, and who it was kind of just it kind of like blotted out the sun for a few years there. Yeah, I think that's an accurate statement.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hello, my dear. We miss you so much in New York.
Oh, I miss you all back.
How's Ohio? How's teaching?
Oh, goodness. I mean, the state is a horror and lunacy. Athens, Ohio rules. Everyone come visit. It's a wonderful little college town that is just like bursting with homosexuals.
Oh, fuck yeah. I would love to. I really, next time I'm traveling through there, we'll be in contact.
Please do. I have a spare room.
Are there things in like the sort of like larger trans writing world that you see happening that you're enjoying, but that you're glad that LittlePuss is not sort of wholly responsible for helping birth into the world?
Oh wow, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like there's a lot of like theory stuff that feels like that's not going to be our jam, and I'm so glad that like other people have that like covered. Like there's other people like writing it and publishing it and putting it out in the world. Um then there is like um what else? We don't do tons of poetry, but there's like a lot. But there's like plenty of people doing trans poetry. We're doing our first poetry book next year, and it's not going to be the priority. Like it has like a lot of other things, but like that feels really really nice. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So, sort of piggybacking off of that a little bit, I'm curious about how the sort of dominant narratives, I guess, also kind of going back to the Nevada thing, have changed over time. Like, what the overarching trends or models of transness or ideas that people are trying to put out there are now that you might not have seen when you started, or vice versa.
You have anything specific on your mind?
More just sort of wondering, like you mentioned the like memoir industrial complex as being one particular type of book that gets out there, and just sort of like if there are genre trends or particular kind of styles that you've seen kind of come in and out of the publishing world.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's anything near as stark as it was in like the memoir industrial complex of like that time period. I think I'm like pretty heartened that I see like I mean, obviously, the fact that like Tori is a megastar is like awesome, and that rules. That Gene Thornton's books are like put out by Big Five, that rules. That like horror writers like Gretchen Felker Martin are out there. That Camila Sosa Viada's books are getting translated from Spanish. That rules. Um, I I think I'm like heartened that there's not that there aren't like holes or things missing, or that like we shouldn't be trying to like keep ourselves kind of like out on watch for that stuff. But I don't think I feel it as stark as like I don't think I feel it to be as stark as like the old memoir industrial complex thing was, or even like the whole like the blot out the sun of Nevada thing was. And again, I say that as somebody who like Nevada is one of my favorite books in the entire world. Yeah. Maybe that's being too Pollyannish. Again, I know there's like still holes and stuff we watch out for, but I don't think it's quite the same as that. I don't think that thing has just been replaced with another thing, basically. I don't feel that way.
All right. We got somebody back here. Okay. I want to leave time for folks to have a quick moment with you before you jet off, and we want to thank everybody who's watching online with us. You can click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy all of the LittlePuss Press books from Charis.
Yeah, buy those. Don't buy mine. Hide people in the camera.
You can buy all of them. I mean, they could,
or that.
They could have a whole set. Like, we're into it. So
see, this is why I publish You Sell.
There you go. They can even pre-order Persona because we dropped that link in.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That rules.
Yeah, so it's ready to go. So click those links. Thank you so much for being with us.